All right, so for chapter 5, I put the homework up. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I did get it up on Friday. I don't know if you guys looked through it. So like I said, it's not just going to be like the homework straight out of the book. I have like all these additional requirements to make your homework a lot more exciting. So if you click on chapter 5 homework, I tell you which ones that I want you to do. I know it's a lot. I mean, I always assign a lot of homework. Make sure you tell your friends so they know what to expect. So here are all the additional instructions. Okay, so like I'm really specific about what I want. So for instance, like chapter 5 problem 5.2 is like similar to the quiz that we took with the Chinese year or zodiac thing, but it actually has instructions on making it a similar program, but doing it for leap year, right? So there's like requirements on what makes a year a leap year, but I tell you specifically that I want you to create a method called public static boolean is leap year, and then you pass in the year. So I give you instructions that this method exists on your driver class, right? So you're going to have, on this particular program, you're going to have your driver class, whatever you name it. You're going to have the main method, and then you're also going to have a method called is leap year, and you're going to use the is leap year to check if a year is a leap year. It's going to return true. If it is, then you have to use the result of that return inside of your main method. And if it's false, you would just tell them like the same thing. You would say like not a leap year, right? You're going to use the result of that as well. For 5.3, let me see, what is this? Assign. Yeah, so so there's this, 5.3 is actually pretty interesting. It's one of my favorite ones because it involves some thinking on your part, right? So the idea of 5.3, I don't know if you looked at it. I have my book, but I don't want to open it. But it's basically, you're going to prompt the user for an integer, and then you're going to go through every digit of that integer and count how many odds and how many evens you have, okay? So if I enter like 5,213, okay, then you should look at every single digit that was entered and determine if it was odd or even. Now, a lot of students think they have to use a string class and do char at whatever, convert it to an integer. Look, I tell you not to do it that way, okay? I don't want you to do it that way. I actually tell you that I want you to just stick with arithmetic operators, okay, and only use things that we've talked about in the class. So avoid using the string class or any of the string methods, okay? The approach that you want to take with that one is just, if I had 500, or actually let's just look at a smaller value. How about like 24? If I had 24 and I wanted to get the 4 out of the 24, like what do I need to do? By what? You're actually on the right track. 6? What the hell? Okay, never mind. Somebody else.
Oh, like the remainder?
Well, the remainder.
Times 2?
But what are you gonna like? What are you trying to divide by? Like you want to pull the 4 out of 24. How would you pull the 4 out of 24?
24 remainder 5?
How about 24 remainder 10?
Or 10?
Okay, so think about 24 remainder 10. Okay, so if we did 24 remainder 10, what is that going to give us?
4.
Right? Okay, so then you can use the result of that, save that value somewhere into another variable, check to see if that's odd or even. Now, if you want to look at the 2, how would you get just the 2 from 24?
Like how would you get 24 remainder 22?
You would just divide the result by 10 as integer, right? And then you're left with the 2. Does that make sense? So what is 24 divided by 10? Come on, guys. You guys had like basic math before, right? 2 point what?
4.
But what if you're using only integers? What are you going to get?
2.
Exactly. That's how you get the 2 out of it, right? So this is not that difficult. You just have to kind of use your math brains a little, right? Okay, so now let's look at the same example, but let's take 512. Okay, 512, user interest 512. You want to look at every single digit and tell me if it's odd or even. How would you look at the 2 on 512? divide by what? Remainder what?
Remainder 10.
Exactly, it's the same thing, it doesn't change. Divide 512 by 10, and then whatever the remainder is going to be the first digit, right? So in your calculator right now, I don't know if you guys have remainder or whatever, if you type 512 divided by 10, the remainder of that is going to be 2, okay? Now, how do you get the 51 out of the 512 after you've pulled out the 2? No. I mean, you divide it by 10, okay, but then what? That as integers, and then you're left with 51. Does that make sense? And then you just run the same check. You just run a loop. Super easy, right? Like, you see the pattern? You see the pattern?
Not really. Who sees it?
Okay. If you don't see the pattern, then you...
Well, I mean, I kind of see it, but can you?
No, I cannot. Because, like I told you, we're past the midway. I've been kind of like telling, oh, go change this on your homework assignment. Go do this. Like, all that's going to change. Now's the time to be a programmer. Now's the time to put on your programming hat and kind of think through these problems, okay? Like, I'm not going to be there when you get your first job, right? So you have to actually think like a programmer, try to figure this out on your own. I know Google's out there. You can Google whatever you want. But, like, take some pride in your work and who you are and just see if you can figure it out, right? Like, you don't even need to know anything about programming. If you just sit there and think, 512, I just want to get the 2 out of that. If I divide that by 10, the remainder would be 2, then I can just have that 2 off to the side. Now, how do we get 51 out of 512? Oh, if I divide it by 10, right, and I just drop off the remainder, then I'm just left with 51. Now, if you want to get the 1 out of 51, what do? Divide it by 10, you get the remainder, right? The 5 out of 51 divided by 10, right? Okay. Anyways, I just pretty much gave you the answer. I feel really bad about it. All right, so the next one, let's see.
So we're going to come back to this.
No, we're not. Like, that's it. Like, that was your explanation. You need to, like, it's not that difficult.
512 divided by 10 is 51.2, and you're asking how to get the 2 out of that number?
Yeah, like, how do you get the 2 out of that? Like, you don't know how to get the 2 out of that? We have the division operator, and then what else do we have in programming?
Remainder
Okay, so divide 512, right, by 10, but instead of using the division operator, you use the remainder operator. What is the result of that? You're going to have to use your computer to do that one. It's the 2, right?
I mean, you just subtract that, like, you save that number and then subtract it.
You could do that as well. You could subtract that and then divide it by, well, I mean, you don't really, if you just use integer math, then you don't have to worry about it, right? Okay? Because it's always going to drop off the decimal point. All right, anyways, moving on. So high-low game, okay? I actually did an example of this, right, when I first started demoing the programs. But I did like 1 through 10. I don't know if you guys remember. But this time, I want you to make a class called high-low game, right? So you're actually going to make a class so that you can instantiate an object. And then this class is going to have instance data for random number, instance data for number of guesses. You're going to have a method named guess, right? And the method named guess, this is going to be the header for it, where you take in a value. So you're going to invoke the method guess on your high-low game object, pass in the user's guess, and then from there, you're going to do some type of logic to determine if you're going to return, what type of integer you're going to return. See, I have it returned in an int, okay? I tell you here that you should just take the difference of your random number and the guess that was passed in. And if it's a 0, that means they guessed it right. If it's a negative value, that means the guess was too high. If it's a positive value, then that means it was too low. I tell you, do not need to use the toString. The other thing that I don't want you to do is I don't want you to use the high-low game class to actually print out any statements to the user. Your driver will do all the statements to the user. Your high-low game is just the object that you're going to check game logic in, right? You're going to in your high-low game, you're going to generate your random number. You're going to have a reset, and you're going to enter in the user's guess, and you're going to get a result out of that method call. Okay. 5.6, there's no additional instructions. I gave you guys an easy one, see? I care. All right, so 5.7, I say just do like 5.4, which was the high-low game, but it's rock, paper, scissors. It's going to work exactly the same, except you're playing rock, paper, scissors. Right, you're going to have like, and I don't give you that much detail on this because I'm leaving like the method names up to you, but you want to make it the exact same way. You're going to make a class in which you instantiate an object. The computer, you're going to have the computer randomly select a rock, paper, or scissors. The best way to do that is just use an integer, 0 for rock, 1 for paper, 2 for scissors, and you just know inside of your class which each of those values mean. And then you're going to have like a guess method or a challenge method. I don't know. It depends on how you want to set up your rock, paper, scissors game. You're going to take in an integer, and then you're going to return an integer, right? The same that way we did for the guess on the high-low game, except you probably want to make the integer do something like, if it's negative, that means the computer won. If it's positive, that means the user won. If it's a 0, that means it's a tie, right? Like it's up, like this is where you kind of decide on what approach you're going to take, but to me, that's probably the better idea, right? If it's negative, you lost. If it's positive, you won, and a 0, the user and the computer tied. All right. Okay, so slot machine, this is a really fun one. It's going to work just like the pair of dice class, right? Oh, I forgot to throw in here, I want you to use the equals method, though, on the slot object. All right, so for this one, you're going to need 3 classes. You're going to need a slot class and a slot machine class, just like the die class and the pair of dice class, right? So the slot class is just basically going to be a slot of a slot machine, which can be a random number between 0 and 9. And on that class, you're going to have a spin method. Guess.
So do we need to make like 3 slots? Or
You will on the slot machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the slot class will have some instance data like value or whatever it is you want to name it. And you're going to have, you don't want a setter for that, right? You just want a getter because you don't want to be able to set the slot to whatever value. Anyways, so you're going to have a method called spin, which is going to randomly set the slot value to a value between 0 and 9, okay? And in your slot machine class, you're going to make the slot machine class a manager of 3 slot machine objects, just like the pair of dice class was a manager of 2 die objects. So when you spin the slot machine, you spin each of the slot objects. Make sense? Right? Now there is additional methods that are in here that the book wanted you to do. Like I wanted you to make a method that gives you a display like that. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's basically a simulation of how the slot will actually look. You just return a string from the slot machine that represents the values of the slot or of all the slots. And I also want, let me see, where is this? Result. So you have a method called result, and you have a method called result string, okay? So if you read this, I tell you that I want result to return an integer indicating the results of the most recent spin. So a 3 is returned if 3 values match, a 2 is returned if 2 values match, and a 0 is returned if no slots match, meaning they're all random. So in this case, if you call results on this spin, which resulted in a 0, 4, and a 3, you would get a 0 back, right? If you spun it and either 2 values matched, then you would get a 2 back. If you spun it and all 3 values match, you would get a 3 back, right? So you're gonna have to make that method result. To do that, the one thing I forgot to put in here is I want you to override the equals method on the slot object so that you can use that to determine if the slots are equal to each other. All right, any questions on that?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah,
Can we go back to problem number 5.2?
5.2.
Just kidding. Well, I mean, I think you know my 5.3 or whatever. I think you already know what I'm gonna ask.
No, what is it?
I'm still thinking about this damn remainder thingy.
So how often do you do math in your head? Like just in your head. Like do you do a lot of math in your head?
Sometimes I find myself doing some math.
Okay, so it's like you basically, the best approach to this is to write down, if I told you, okay, if I gave you the number 512, and I told you, okay, well, how many of those digits are odd? How many of those digits are even? Right? Immediately you know because you just see them right away, right? Okay, but I told you, you know what? Instead, what I want you to do is tell me the value, if the value at the ones place is even or odd, okay? And after you figured out if it's even or odd, then I want you to remove that value and then make the value 51. Like if you're basically taking off, you know, 512 goes from 51. 51 will then go to 5, right? But every time you do that, then you examine the value in the ones place if it's odd or even. Okay, so just think about how you do that, like in your head, like if you're just doing math. Yeah.
So how would evaluate those single digits to even? Okay, okay.
Yeah. All right, any other questions besides like math stuff? Besides 5.3, 5.2? I know it's difficult. Programming is difficult. You know, I mean, I wasn't going to tell you what you're doing wrong and right the whole time, right? But like me personally, I mean, I just think like this is where it starts getting fun, right? If you enjoy programming, this should be fun for you, figuring out these problems. If you don't enjoy programming, this should probably be the worst experience of your life, okay? However, like I said, I mean, my final is going to be just as complicated, okay? So like now you have to kind of put everything together that we learned and that we're going to learn and write a program, right? You have to kind of start thinking like that.